The inside story on the issues that affect you and your community. This is Local 12 Newsmakers.
Good morning and welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers. I'm Dan Hurley. Many of our region's anchor institutions, those that are distinctive and essential building blocks of our identity as a metropolitan region, are our arts and cultural organizations. Some, like the May Festival and the Symphony Orchestra, are housed in Music Hall, built in the 1870s. Others, like the Cincinnati Museum Center, are housed in the 1931 Union Terminal. The Cincinnati Zoo and Art Museum are housed in massive complexes that have been added onto over the course of 130 years or more. All have serious, basic, expensive maintenance needs, as well as desires for better facilities that will allow them to achieve their aspirational goals, which they argue will solidify Cincinnati's reputation as an arts and cultural center that is unequaled among mid-sized cities that often attempt to rival us in terms of their urban centers. We all know that there is an immediate issue on the table around the efforts to revitalize Music Hall. But this morning, I want to take a longer view. How do we, as a community, address the needs and aspirations of the arts and cultural institutions in an orderly and systematic way? To do that, I am joined this morning by Andy Scott, the president of Green Light Projects, an economic development consulting firm that specializes in large historic restoration initiatives. In the 1990s, Mr. Scott served as the executive director of the Union Station Assistance Corporation in Kansas City, responsible for the $260 million restoration of the nation's second largest train station. That project included the passage of the only by-state sales tax in the nation, which generated $120 million from residents of both Kansas and Missouri. Currently, Andy is working with the Carol Ann and Ralph V. Hale U.S. Bank Foundation to explore the possibility of a systematic, long-term approach to public financing of the needs of the anchor cultural institutions. Andy, welcome to Local 12 Newsmakers.
Dan, good morning. It's great to be here. Thanks very much.
You know, all of us hear these huge numbers, you know, with Music Hall, the number is in the hundreds of millions, hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions in case of the Museum Center, their needs, and we saw some of the crumbling walls in there, some real structural problems. What is the goal here? I mean, there is so much on the table for this community. What's the goal of your approach?
I think the fundamental goal is to analyze the problem. I mean, you set it up just fine, Dan, in terms of what really has gone on over the last 10 years when this issue was raised by task forces that identified hundreds of millions that would be needed by 2025 to be addressed. And since then, the efforts continue, and that's why the Hale Foundation went ahead and stepped up in a more proactive way. And in fact, we are creating in the very near future the Greater Cincinnati Cultural Facilities Alliance nonprofit that will establish a ongoing forum of, call it policy analysis, of looking at other cities and how they have also faced similar situations, which is, ranges from Cleveland to St. Louis to Kansas City, particularly Denver. That this is a challenge that is not new in America, but people have figured out ways to, in our case, is back to your question, to create a new approach to funding from public and private sources. Not depending upon the county or the city, and not depending solely on the private sector and or foundations, because Dan, the fact is, the money is just not there for either one of these parties to do it by themselves, which is why we're in the situation we're in. So a new way that brings them together, that is a community effort, is the focus of our work right now. This new organization, will the various major cultural institutions be members of that? Will they be constituent members, or will this be something that is advocating for their needs, but aside from them? As it's envisioned, it certainly will involve them as, just as you said, as members. And I wouldn't say just the big four, but also this is a major industry as you pointed out, regions compete globally these days. The cultural, scientific, arts, all those kinds of things here in Cincinnati, our founders knew that was important. That's why they established such great facilities. And the people, just this past weekend, I'm sure, many, there were hundreds of different events people attended and experienced. That's all a part of a major industry that exists for Cincinnati. A capstone experience coming up is the World Choir Games, a global, international gathering coming right here to Cincinnati. And so, organizations, whether they're small, medium, or large, will, I'm sure, be invited to participate in this, as well as the average public person, not only just in the city of Cincinnati, but in Hamilton County and throughout the region.
In terms of the methodology, we're talking about a sales tax, right? As it's envisioned at this moment. I know we're way down the road from
Yes,
this.
that's a good way of putting it, Dan. There's lots of different topics. There's not a final plan. But to your question, when you look at other, again, cities and a way to, and I think about that single parent or somebody out there who's got challenges financially, what's going to motivate them to feel like this matters to them? And if there's a way to do, as other cities have, a small amount of money, and I'll give you an example, one 25-cent piece, a quarter, okay, for each $100 spent by someone is all that it would take for over a long period of time, if that were brought, that kind of, amount of money was brought to bear, along with private sector. I mean, this is a two-way street where funders from the private side come together, then a tremendous amount of money could be raised that is a major economic development initiative. I'll give you one. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No.
Well, one quick example. If the recent Music Hall economic impact, the study that was done, I mean, that was 3,000 jobs, almost $35 million. If you multiply that out for dealing with the facilities you listed in the beginning of the show, and you know that again, that 25-cent piece over 30 years, because we've done that kind of analysis, that can turn into, in general terms, $1 billion of economic development impact for this community, where the dollars stay in this community, and 10,000 jobs. I mean, now, that work is still ongoing, and those are, again, concept, but if you model it after, or just, multiply out for what Music Halls was, that's a tremendous amount of benefit, along with the education benefits that come to the community.
We know that, I know that about some of these examples that you mentioned, and what I know about most is St. Louis. I happen to work with a lot of the people 20 years ago when they were putting that into place. But one that really interests me is the one that you were involved with in Kansas City. And what interests me about it is that it crosses state lines. And here we are, this metropolitan region that we actually have 3 states represented here, 2 very heavily, Kentucky. And one of the problems is we've never been able to figure out how to get multiple counties to buy in to any of these kinds of investments. We see it with the 2 stadia, the Reds and the Bengals stadiums. They're only coming from Hamilton County, and as as the Wall Street Journal pointed out, we're one of only 2 counties in the country that's trying to do that on their own, Tampa, Florida being the other one. And how did you get it done in Kansas City? How did you convince people in another state to buy into something like this?
Well, I'll try to quickly, think of 3 or 4 different issues. The timing was helpful because there'd been attempts. This was a train station that actually is technically larger in its public spaces than Grand Central Station in New York, and it's sitting in downtown. But it hadn't been occupied in over 20 years. There was a chain link fence around it. The ceiling was falling in. It was actually a dangerous building. So actually the community got to the point of seeing what an eyesore, and even to the point where some folks were talking about tear it down. And it was the front door, and it was the living room of the history of the city. And so in a very open way, that meant transparent, and engaging the community. From private to public to nonprofit to neighborhoods, to everybody gaining their input about what could be changed and done here, and in this case, to create a new science center for the community that didn't exist, but also a very determined team, a very I'd say, bold thinkers that were willing to take on the idea of what would it take to go ahead and think to create an analysis around a bi-state compact, and then to keep taking the chances to explore those options, and then communicating with people about them. And so it was a combination of things, bold thinking, and also, Dan would say, a key thing was unification and compromise. There had been, quickly summing up, interests of arts organizations to do something like this in the past. And basically, they knew they weren't unified, and they stepped aside and said, let's let this train station go first, because it's a single focus project. And so people made compromises and then were unified to work together to bring that outcome about.
To get that done, to get the multi-state, the two-state buy-in, did you start on one side of the river and get some funding in place there and then go, or did you get the big funding picture so that it all went at one time? Because one of the, you can always sometimes talk about, well, we'll do this, and in our case, we could do this in Hamilton County, and then, stage 2, we'll get buy-in someplace else. As a friend of mine says, always beware of stage 2, it never happens. How did you do it in Kansas City? Did you get the whole thing worked out?
Well, yes. It had been a talked about topic for a period of time. So people on both sides of the state line were familiar with the idea. But it was worked on in more of a unified approach of holding conversations with parties on both sides to find out what is the blend of what will work. And it was a very collaborative process. From local people as well as leadership, working together. And so, it was a back and forth constantly. But it didn't just do one side and then go to the other. And I would say right now on our efforts, just Dan, I've spent time talking to people in surrounding counties beyond Hamilton County. I will give you an opinion that, and I think the recent poll that the Inquirer did, is that these are regional attractions. Everybody, mostly understands that. The memberships of families that use these facilities, they come from around the region. But generally speaking, given the economic conditions, we're all in here, in this new economy and so forth. Practically speaking, we hear from people, the recommendation that is focus, on Hamilton County where, where the facilities currently exist. At the same time as talk to people in other counties where there are projects, so that when you create a plan and a program, it's easy for other counties to opt in. I will tell you one example of what's worked in other cities is, if Hamilton County figures it out, there could be incentives and benefits for the residents of Hamilton County that other counties don't have. And when that has occurred, it's been very interesting to see how other counties—
discount
that's right.
admissions?
In not only things like that or memberships, but in fact the outreach programs that all these organizations that use these facilities have, that go out to schools, that go out to the communities, that there are cases where they then will go more to, in this case, Hamilton County. And one can see that other counties get much more interested in being a part of that solution. I will, when those benefits are afforded them as well. One last point also about your earlier question about a sales tax. That is a regional approach in a sense, in that in Hamilton County, if that were to be done here, 45 to 50% of the sales tax income actually comes from non-Hamilton County residents. And that is a way to spread out the support, which is really the key. It's how do you spread out the support?
Yeah, I know, but I mean, we got that with the stadium taxes, and I got to tell you, most people don't feel that. I mean, statistically, that may be true. Reality, that may be true. But it's not the way it feels.
I understand that for reasons that have to do with, and this, I'm glad you brought the point up in a sense, I'll be brief. The project promised voters certain things were going to occur that were as basic as what the project was going to cost, what its schedule was going to be, and things of that nature. And that didn't work out. Right. And that is part of what is the residue that's still there. I can tell you, I can say, and I'm proud to have been part of a team of people that went out to the voters in those counties in 2 states in 1995 and told them, here's the scope of the project, here's the projected cost, here's the schedule. And in 1999, it opened under budget a day earlier than what was earlier recommended, and the honor and the commitment to fulfilling the promises to the public. I'm fortunate to have lived through that, know it can be done, and that can be done again here, and we can move beyond the stadium residue. Essentially, I'm out of time, but I have to ask one. The Cincinnati Enquirer published a poll which showed about 33% region-wide of support, 46% opposition. In Hamilton County, 39% support, 47% opposition. What do you take away from that poll? Are you discouraged? Actually, we weren't discouraged at all by that, because we're in the early stages of this. There's a lot more public education about many more facts and benefits that can come with this, and the process of how it would be done, which hasn't really occurred. We were also pleased that out of that poll, people are now more aware that the zoo itself needs $100 million to fix the things there and improve it, that it does incredible work here that's popular and appreciated by the citizenry. But the oldest zoo buildings in the entire country are right here in Cincinnati. And the working conditions, the animal conditions, that institution, that great institution, it needs this kind of support too. And one of the things I just have to point out as we end, the zoo has done an amazing job over the last 6 years creating a sustainable physical facility, generating their own power, and just amazing stuff that they've accomplished with practically no budget at all, saving huge amounts of money. Absolutely. And it's really fascinating. And this is an effort to only help that facility and others much more. Everybody should go to the zoo and observe what's happening. Right. There. Unification is the key. Okay. Thank you very much. You'll be back. Stay tuned. After the break, I'll be joined by this year's winner of the Best Named Award in Town, the Charles P. Taft Civic Gumption Award. Welcome back. You only meet a few truly great people in your life. For me, one of those was Charles P. Taft II. If you're old enough to remember Charlie Taft, he was a person with an amazing combination of confidence and humility, courage and kindness. He had gumption. 10 days ago, the Charter Committee of Cincinnati bestowed the Charles P. Taft Civic Gumption Award on Alice Skirtz. The award committee described Ms. Skirtz as, quote, untiring and fearless in her 30-plus years of commitment to the citizens of Cincinnati, especially the poor, in the arena of affordable housing, and for her support of the first Caracol House for persons with HIV/AIDS. I am privileged to be joined this morning by Alice Skirtz, who also has just published a new book called Econocide, The Elimination of the Urban Poor, which we will also be talking about. Alice, welcome to Newsmakers. Thank you. You and I kind of got to know each other 20 years ago, yes. Traveling to our sister city in the Soviet Union, and that was really fascinating. You just got this award. Right. What's your memory of Charlie Taft? I'm sure you have. Do you have a personal memory?
I do. Worked with him on a number of matters related particularly to community councils, but also turning up in a church pew one morning where on my left was one of our clients from social work and on my right was the son of the president. I mean, it was, it's a perfect Charlie Taft image.
It's who he was. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just amazing. Common touch was just unbelievable. Commitment was unbelievable about a whole range of things. Correct. It's just absolutely amazing.
Gumption is just perfect to describe him.
The naming of that award is just so perfect. One of the things that was mentioned, and I just alluded to it, was your commitment to helping Caracol create the first house, Caracol House, for people with HIV/AIDS. Right. Describe that a little bit and describe where that house is.
The house is in our neighborhood of Clifton Heights, immediately adjacent to the home we live in. We became the landlords for the first housing service that they provided. Our neighbors thought it was the worst thing that could have happened and made an all-out assault on us, just furious, largely prejudice, misunderstanding, and this was, at the time, was this brand new dreadful disease. But we persevered and went on, and that was the first residential location.
Why did you feel called to that?
Everyone else was saying no, throwing up roadblocks, and I knew these folks were desperately in need of housing. I mean, they couldn't go to shelters. They were often too sick to go back home, but they needed some protective housing, and that was it.
Yeah, and it's sort of that, and that's what I find interesting about you as I've gotten to know you over the years, sort of that simple approach. It needs to be done,
right,
and you just do it. You've got this brand new book out, Econocide, and maybe we can get a good photo of it, a good close-up. And it's the elimination of the urban poor. Here we go. First off, congratulations.
Thank you.
Secondly, what was your goal in telling this story and writing this book?
In some ways, I had to do it for myself. I realized what was going on, policy-driven effort after effort after effort to remove housing and services from our most needy citizens. And so I just started writing it, and then I had to read it, and then I had to figure it out, and that's what became the book.
You have, it's very early in the book, what I sort of jumped off the page at me is your thesis statement, and I'd like to take a look at that. Your thesis for the book is laid out on page 3, and it reads that it is largely an unseen part of a broader story of economic development, housing policy, and abandonment of civic responsibilities that have forsaken the poor. What I find interesting about that, you're not saying just that city officials, business leaders have sort of, things have gotten away from us. Your argument is here, this is systematic, and that they're, and consistently systematic elimination of housing for the poor.
Right, in the name of economic development, and it literally closes poor people out of the market. There is no affordable housing in this community. We fight over things like the waiting list for the Metropolitan Housing Authority, and indeed the funding that comes there. There are 15,000 households on waiting lists for Metropolitan Housing assistance. We have the Housing Impaction Ordinance that forbids using federal housing money in the poorest neighborhoods. The homeless to homes policy has done everything but housing. It focuses entirely on upgrading shelters, of improving services for.
But let's stop on that, because Kevin Finn, who runs that organization, I've had him on, and I have said publicly, I thought it was one of the best plans I'd ever seen. Now, it is focused on shelters and improving the quality of the shelters we have. So what we see now is a new lighthouse shelter for young people. We're seeing a new shelter being built across from United Way for women. We're seeing some approaches that seem to me to be good.
Well, number one, remember, Homeless to Homes focused only on single people. It did not focus on families.
I agree.
Number two, its focus is, as you said, to improve shelter, a worthy cause, no doubt about it. But it ignores housing. The reason folks are in shelter is because they don't have affordable housing. And it's as simple as that. So we put our effort and resources to improving shelters without doing anything about housing.
You also make a great argument in this book about the impact of privatization of public services. And just to quote, you describe privatization as, it absolves the city of responsibility for the totality of the sphere of public obligation and poisons the public narrative.
If we privatize, turn over to private entities the decision-making on housing, economic development, planning, we can absolve ourselves of having to worry about getting some affordable units in the plan. And it means the decisions are being made by people who are not us, not the public.
That whole public
whole
dynamic,
dynamic.
which people sometimes lose faith in and sometimes find frustrating, but it is the public dynamic. We're not here to do the book.
Right.
And where could people get Econocide?
It is available online from the National Association of Social Workers Press, and I'm told that the service is very good.
Okay, National Association for Social Workers Press.
NASWpress.org.
Okay, NASWpress.org. Thank you very much. Congratulations on the Gumption Award.
Thank you.
And I know you'll just keep working in this city.
Thank you.
Thank you for making Newsmakers a part of your Sunday morning. Join us again next week when the focus is on the work of a woman who will lead 3 choruses in the World Choir Games, including one where the judges will have to travel to the chorus. Have a good week.